Hello and welcome to Scientifically Speaking. Today we're going to be talking about things like the Schumann resonance and the EM field, and what I've said in several videos, including this video on screen, is that evolution adaptation is linked to the Schumann resonances and the field that we live in. And basically, I've stated that DNA is activated by this field, and it's the only reason our DNA is activated. And I've said that every time there is a micronova and there is a voltage drop within our solar system, because power is always going down due to entropy, every time the EM field is reactivated, it is lower than it was before the micronova. So what happens is the field activates DNA, but with a shift in frequency, it now activates different DNA, which is where supposed evolution adaptation comes from. We're actually de-evolving because the power ratio of our EM field is continuously dropping after each magnetic excursion and micronova from the sun. So when it does turn back on, you get animals that are born that are not like their parents. And this may happen over 2 or 3 generations. They will continuously change due to the fact that different DNA-coded frequencies are being activated by the electromagnetic field, because DNA is an electric-coded frequency that when electricity goes through it, it produces an EM flare in the precise measurements, quantities, hertz, range, frequencies that will give it a shape. Okay, saying that, now let's have a look at a new paper that's just come out that confirms this. So here we are at the Springer link, called Inherited Differences of Migratory Phenotypes in 2 Acrocephalus warblers in relation to geomagnetic field parameters. Abstract. Birds have evolved morphological, physiological and behavioral adaptations encoded in their migratory programs to enable successful migration. Sometimes, even closely related species, such as the Eurasian reed warbler and the sedge warbler, may adopt different migration strategies to reach their wintering grounds in sub-Saharan Africa. To study them in detail, we aim to compare the temporal variations of activity patterns and fueling of lab-held warblers caught in southern Sweden during autumn migration, and compare the results with respect to known differences in their migration strategies. In order to investigate if the activity and fueling were controlled by magnetic information, 2 groups of birds per species were experimentally subjected to magnetic fields anticipated during their migration via the Mediterranean and at the winter destinations, and control experiments were performed in the local magnetic field. Both species expressed a peak of nocturnal activity just after sunset and increased activity before sunrise. Reed warblers were strictly active during the night, whereas sedge warblers also showed increasing morning activity, possibly associated with intense foraging during stopover and longer migratory flights extending into the day when passing ecological barriers. There was no difference in overall activity between the 2 species, but a change of active intervals during the experimental period with reed warblers increasing and sedge warblers decreasing activity over time, probably reflecting similar anticipated migratory distances but differences in migratory strategies. The simulation of magnetic parameters influenced the activity and fueling in reed warblers but not in sedge warblers. These results support inherited differences in migratory strategies observed in the wild and suggest species-specific adaptations to magnetic field information regulating migration. Significant statement. Migratory birds often cover thousands of kilometers between their breeding and wintering sites. To successfully reach the destination, a bird may adopt a unique migration strategy, including accumulation of fuel reserves and changes of diel activity pattern. Field observations have revealed how populations of birds perform their migrations. However, detailed monitoring of activity and fueling over time for individual birds in a controlled setting is only possible in the laboratory. By using continuous video recording and automatic computer vision behavioral analysis, we quantified migratory activity patterns of two related species of warblers. We showed that the Eurasian reed warblers were strictly active during night, whereas sedge warblers also showed increased morning activity, reflecting their migratory strategies observed in the wild. By simulating the magnetic field of sites along the migration route and wintering grounds, we found species-specific adaptations to magnetic field information. So that last line is what really counts. By simulating the magnetic field on the birds of sites along the migration route and wintering grounds, we found species-specific adaptations to magnetic field information. And what that means is where they were influenced evolution, adaptation, or devolution. Which would explain why some cultures in the past have risen up very quickly while the rest of the world, relatively speaking, were still goat herders. Because their intelligence was higher. If they're in a high magnetic field, just for example, more DNA will be activated. If you have less of a magnetic field, less of that DNA will be activated. It's funny how the North American Indians were all supposedly 6-7 foot, yet all the people in China were like 5 foot. So you have to think of DNA is specific to the magnetic field that you are brought up in. And they're trying to stop this by pushing every single citizen on Earth into a different country and supporting migration. All that does is water down the product. Thanks very much. My name is Lee. I follow the Christ. And I'm telling you all about the things he showed and told me. So, yeah, your DNA is activated by the EM field, and that's another confirmation that God told me, showed me, that I have now showed you. Thanks a lot. Science, again, finally catching up. Thanks a lot.